Okay, this morning, this is just kind of video to myself because every time I get this dovetail jig out, I'm always trying to figure out which way do I spin the board and get the darn things to line up. So the first one that I like to do, the easiest for me, I like to do the dovetail bit first. I've got some notes up here saying that I want the rounded edges pointed outward, and all I have to remember on this piece of board is that this edge, or whichever edge I'm using, stays that way. I put it in here the first time, hit the little bump stop, push it all the way up, crank it down, hold it in place, grab another piece of wood the same thickness, and we will make a line on here, up underneath here, and then draw a line under it. And that's going to tell me how deep my dovetail bit goes right to this line. So then I'm going to cut all of these. Alright, and then I want to take this guy out of here, and I want that edge to stay there. I'm just going to turn him over like that, put him back in all the way up to the top. Now my router's already set, the depth's already set, and I'm going to cut all of those, and I've got the easy ones done. So just have to remember, this edge stays here. Whatever side is out or in doesn't matter as long as that left edge, in this case, stays against that bump stop in here. That way is fine. Okay, and that way is fine. All right, set our depth by making a mark in the line, a line on the board. Okay, here's the harder one. It's the one I always seem to goof up, and I end up doing, I don't know, 2 or 3 of these. I waste a lot of wood because I'm just like, what in the world am I doing here? So you got to turn this guy over. Don't move any of these fingers. Loosen him up, take him out, turn him over, put him straight back on. Do not switch end for end. Now, here's one of the things I always seem to forget. In this particular case, I'm using some American cedar, American cherry, and I always, in this case, I wanted it planed down to 1/4 of an inch thick. So I keep thinking that 1/4 of an inch here, these side markers, is where I set it. That's not true. You need to set these numbers based upon the width of your pins. So if I have a 5/16 widest portion of my pin, that's where I set this number at. Okay, in this case, that's about what it was, 5/16. It was one little line under it. But there we go. Now, I'm going to put in my straight bit. Put that in my router, okay, and then I'm going to take my piece of wood. This is a different piece of wood. Now this is the ones we did before where the fronts are backs. Now we're going to do the sides, and we're going to cut the grooves in here a little differently. So I'm going to mark this so I can remember just for reference, and I'm going to run this one through here with a straight bit, and I'm going to cut a pretty big notch in here, and it's going to be tapered. Fine and dandy. Now, what I have to do, keep track of that edge. I roll it over that way, and I put it on this side. Okay, so here's the problem with it. If you don't have the distance between this end and the tip of that pin the exact same distance over here, it's going to be wrong. So you have to make sure that your distance, and I measured it from this point here to that point, is exactly the same. So I move my fingers to where they're at, and then I will cut the same thing on this line right here as I do on this line. I got to keep the faces out though. I got to keep the front of this board outward. That's the tricky part. I can't flip it. Okay, so I'm going to start here, clamp it up here, mark my line, set my depth on my new bit. Okay, I'm going to notch all of those out, rotate my board, keeping the face outward, clamping it back in here. And as long as I say these pins here are exactly the same on either side, I can do that. If they're not the same on either side, now I've got other problems. If I need one more pin, say my board's a little wider, I can slide these inner ones over and don't touch this outer one. And then when I go back to the other side, I can bring them back again and just butt them up here tight. Works just fine.